Cam Jansen has stepped out. We got Andrew Kauffman stepping in, sports director at KMIZ in Columbia, brought to you by International Tap House, iTap. Check them out. Andrew, how you doing?
Doing great. Definitely not as athletic as Cam Jansen, but I'll do my best.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was going to really talk football here, but then we really got caught into one of these rabbit holes where Cam didn't know. So I'm wondering if you covered this dude, this Clayton, is it Eckard?
I had a feeling you were going to mention him.
Well, I wish Cam was back in here because Cam is from Eureka, Missouri. Cam, we think, is the most famous person from Eureka, Missouri because he played about 10 years in the NHL. Here's this dude, Clayton, and we were joking with Cam that he's a better-looking, younger version of Cam, and he's about to be the Bachelor. So I'm wondering, did you cover this dude at Mizzou?
Yes, so I did. My first season, as a professional, was 2015. It was the 2015 season. I also, at going to Mizzou, you work at KOMU and you get a chance to do all the Mizzou stuff as a student. So I definitely, know of Clayton Eckard, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I studied the third string tight end, too much, during his time. So I did look up his stats, though. I think he's got 2 catches. Both in 2015, one against South Carolina, one against Florida, 2 catches for 14 yards. So definitely a stud on the field. Wish him all the best in Bachelor Nation.
No, we're going to have a lot of fun making fun of Cam for the whole entirety of the show. I might even have to watch now. I stopped watching The Bachelor about 10 years ago, but I think we're going to have to keep watching just to make fun of Cam. All right, so the football game, we'll rewind first. And you were in Lexington, right? First of all, so we know Mizzou loses 35-28 to Kentucky. Tigers falling to 1-1 on the season. How was the game day atmosphere, though, at Kentucky?
It was really good. And I think back, I'm like, okay, I haven't been in a game day atmosphere like that since 2019. All of 2020 was kind of a wash. And so I'm trying to check myself a little bit because I've been in some legit atmospheres, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, those places, even Florida. So I wonder how much of it is, for me personally, like, wow, this is my first time back. But it was way better than any other time I've been to Kentucky, which I believe this was my 3rd time in Lexington. So I got to give the Kentucky fans a lot of credit. They showed up, but I asked some people around Lexington, like, what do you guys think of the crowd? And these are Kentucky fans, so I'm not sure if I'm buying it completely, but they're like, yeah, this is kind of like what it's like at an SEC game, but I'm not so sure. It was pretty legit, and I think that, good for Kentucky because I think they got a really good team, and if they're going to get that kind of support for football games, I'm sure as the season goes on, if they keep winning, that place could be, Kroger Field is not, it's not like, going to South Carolina or going to Florida, at least in the past, but maybe it's getting better. And I think Saturday was a good testament to that. It was fun. It was electric. The game was great, back and forth. So it was especially fun for me to be on the sidelines of a game like that because I hadn't been in that kind of environment since 2019.
We're talking with Andrew Kauffman, sports director at KMIZ, discussing Mizzou football. Yeah, and it's interesting talking about Kentucky because I don't feel like it was very long ago, maybe 10 years ago, before Mark Stoops gets there, where Kentucky is the absolute laughingstock of the SEC, along with, you have Vanderbilt too. But it wouldn't have been crazy for Kentucky to win a game or 0 or 2 games. They really have become a legitimate SEC program pretty quickly from where they started.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. And when you get a transfer quarterback from Penn State, I mean, I think that says a lot about where your program's heading. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that I know everything about the Kentucky football team, but it seems from what I've read that Mark Stoops has really done a good job of recruiting the state of Kentucky and getting the best athletes from Kentucky. And that's something that I know that Eli Drinkwitz is trying to do with Mizzou. So it seems like they've been really successful with that. And with Mark Stoops, when you got a guy that's been there for 9 seasons, that says a lot, especially in college football when it seems like it's a carousel in and out the door of head football coaches, but definitely not the case at Kentucky.
So, Andrew, give us the beyond the box score. If you're watching the game and if you read the box score, it's easy to say another great game by Tyler Beatty, another awful game by the Mizzou defense, especially in terms of trying to stop the run. So what did you see on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, Drinkwitz in his press conference earlier this week, he just kept saying one more play, and they would have, gotten the job done. Which kind of, in a way, if Mookie Cooper would have caught that pass, I don't know if that's necessarily on Mookie Cooper on that final drive. It was more on Connor Bazelak because Cooper was open, and if they would have connected on that long deep ball after the blocked field goal, you're looking at either a tie game or, who knows, maybe Drinkwitz would have gone for two, and Mizzou could have won the game. So they, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at how bad that rushing defense was, it's amazing that Mizzou even had a chance to tie the game there at the end. And I think that was the big takeaway for this team, was that they were able to fight back. They were down 14 points 3 different times, including a 14-0 deficit right at the beginning. And I think in years past, Mizzou would not have been able to come back like they did in this one. And I think that says a lot about the coaching staff. I think it says a lot about Connor Bazelak. I gained a lot of respect for Connor after this game, watching what he was able to do and lead this team to a comeback. And they made plays when they needed to. Jalen Carlisle, right at the end of the first half, when Kentucky was about to go up 3 scores, knocks the ball out at the goal line, and then Mizzou is able to drive that down the field. And Connor Bazelak, instead of, settling for a field goal before halftime, he's able to connect with Kiki Chisholm, get a touchdown, make it a 1-score game with Mizzou getting the ball right before, or getting the ball to start the second half. Of course, that did not quite go Mizzou's way with the interception, and Drinkwitz took the blame for that one, saying it was a bad play call. But, I think Connor would like to have had that one back. So, all in all, I think if you're a Mizzou fan, you should be pretty happy with this result. And I think Drinkwitz, in a way was happy with the result, and like I mentioned last week, the talent gap right now. Drinkwitz still needs another year to get some of those guys in there. And right now, I think Kentucky had more talent. Kentucky definitely made some mistakes to let Mizzou back in the game. There's no question, but I don't want to take anything away from what the Tigers were able to do and come back. And that should have, I think, Mizzou fans hopeful.
Yeah, and in terms of talent, I was going to ask you about that, because with a new defensive coordinator, even though he has great pedigree, Steve Wilkes, the defense through 2 games has been really bad. Let's be real. And I'm reading this tweet that I read earlier from our guy Dave Matter. He says, here's the story of Mizzou's season through 2 weeks. Tyler Beatty leads the nation in yards from scrimmage, 196 per game, while the defense is last in the Power 5. Last in the Power 5. In yards allowed and rushing yards allowed per game. Now, it's only 2 games, but I'm wondering. So on the defensive side of the ball, it's probably a mix of all of these things, but do you think it's more so? Is it lack of talent? Is it scheme? Is it new coordinator and trying to basically work in that scheme and they're just not there yet? What do you think?
It's definitely a mix of everything. And, we are asking, all the players and even Coach Wilkes this week what the problem is. And that's definitely, I think, it's a little bit of everything. You got a new scheme. Blaze Aldridge, Mizzou linebacker, said, anytime you get a new scheme, it's hard. So he admitted, that it was hard. They're not, sugarcoating around it that this new scheme that Steve Wilkes, an NFL guy, is bringing into this college team, it's difficult, and it's definitely taken Mizzou time to figure out. When Steve Wilkes was asked if he wants to simplify things, he wasn't quite ready to do that just yet, but he is going to make an adjustment, at least with himself. He's going to go up to the press box this week as opposed to being on the field. Thinks he's going to be able to see the action a little bit better. He took full responsibility. Steve Wilkes, stand-up guy. First thing he said in his news conference was, I take full responsibility for what's going on. 126th in rushing defense. You kind of just mentioned that. They've given up 508 yards rushing in 2 games. That is just unexcusable. I think it starts with the linebackers. Devin Nicholson and Blaze Aldridge are the 2 guys that are playing linebacker the most. Coach Drinkwitz during his press conference said that he'd like to have 5 guys playing linebacker, but unfortunately, guys aren't stepping up in practice, and so those are kind of the 2 guys he's got to roll out with. So Mizzou needs some help. Jalen Carlisle has definitely been the best defensive player so far. He's forced 3 turnovers in 2 games, but he missed the first half of the Central Michigan game because of a targeting penalty last year. And then he missed a lot of the second half against Kentucky because I guess he was sick at halftime and couldn't come back until the fourth quarter. So if you get that guy in for a full game, maybe that helps a little bit. But I think it's more than just Jalen Carlisle. This team needs to figure out the scheme, or if they can't figure it out, they might have to simplify things because it's not going to get easier as it might be easier this week against SEMO, but it won't be easier as the season goes on.
We're talking with Andrew Kauffman, sports director at KMIZ in Columbia, brought to you by International Tap House, iTap. Check them out. We'll tell you more about them in just a second. And if you're searching for positives, though, through 2 games and even in the loss, you can say Mizzou has played much better in the second half of both of these games than the first half. And I know it was a big narrative. I feel like more so the first half of Gary Pinkel's career at Mizzou that he wasn't great at making halftime adjustments. I feel like we talked about that a lot. And so, okay, it's 2 games, you're 1-1, but it does seem like Eli Drinkwitz and Mizzou, they're able to correct some of their mistakes they're making early and play better towards the end of the game.
Well, I think just like the first couple of minutes of the game against Kentucky, going right down 14-0, that was kind of a big wake-up call. Like, okay, we need to figure our stuff out. But to Bazelak's credit, like I mentioned, he took what the defense gave him, especially in the second half on some of those drives. Was able to, a lot of checkdowns. A lot of people, including me, have been critical of the deep ball. Where are we going to see it? Is this going to be effective? Is this a problem? But it seemed like from talking to Drinkwitz and talking to Bazelak that's just the way Kentucky was playing it. They were just taking what they could. And I'm sure in the SEMO game this week we'll see a lot more deep balls, and hopefully there'll be some more deep ball connections. On the defensive side, they did get better, I would say, in the second half. They had some key third down stops that were able to give Mizzou the ball back as opposed to the first half. Chris Rodriguez, just running all over him. Although Chris Rodriguez, he was running all over him in the second half too. So I don't think the defense got tremendously better in the second half, but at least it was enough to keep Mizzou in the game.
We're talking with Andrew Kauffman, sports director at KMIZ. I want to ask you a little bit about recruiting, because we should have some big recruiting news tomorrow. Luther Burden, the top wide receiver in the country, saying he's going to release his top 3. Now, he had committed to Oklahoma, really good wide receiver. I interviewed him a couple times back when he was at Cardinal Ritter, and then he transfers to East St. Louis. And I know the recruiting game is something you guys follow really closely. I haven't talked with Luther Burden in the last year or so, but I'm wondering, from the Mizzou perspective, would it be a shock if he's not mentioning Mizzou in his top 3? I'm hearing Georgia. I don't know if Oklahoma is still going to crawl back in there. But from talking with Eli Drinkwitz, I know he can't mention specific players, but you think Mizzou has a pretty good chance for Luther Burden?
I think to get in the top 3, I would be surprised if Mizzou wasn't in the top 3. I've never talked to Luther Burden. I haven't got a chance to meet him yet. Hopefully one day I will if he decides to come to Mizzou. But I think this growing sense around the program is that Mizzou will make the top 3. But then you just never know. Especially with recruits, and you can always commit somewhere and say you're going to go somewhere else. So it's tough to dive into the recruiting too much because there's so much back and forth, and commitment is a very loose term these days, especially with a guy who's already decommitted from one place. So until they sign the piece of paper, it's never official. But I know Mizzou would love to have Luther Burden, especially right now if we're talking about Connor Bazelak, throwing a deep ball. I think he could definitely use Luther Burden on this team this year. That's for sure.
And so this week, I'm seeing that Eli Drinkwitz put a piece of paper in everybody's locker room and said, don't overlook SEMO. I still call them 1AA schools, FCS, FBS. But teams like this can beat the big dogs. It's happened, 7 or 8 times already this year. So it sure seems like, look, I get it. There's a letdown after Kentucky. You're facing SEMO. You are at home, but it seems like Eli Drinkwitz wants to make sure his boys are not kind of overlooking SEMO.
Yeah, and I don't think motivation is going to be an issue at all this week. You're coming off that tough loss. The team was definitely disappointed after losing the game. You mentioned that he put the list up of I think he said 7 in his news conference, but we double checked it's 8. So we got to hold Coach Drinkwitz accountable there. 8 FCS teams have won over Power 5 or Division I teams this year. So Mizzou definitely does not want to be the next one of them, and I don't think they will. SEMO's 0-4 against Mizzou. They're 0-2 to start the season. Mizzou beat them back in 2019, 50-0. Coach Drinkwitz it's hard not to laugh when he says it seriously, but he opens his news conference with, saying that SEMO's blocked 12 kicks in the last 3 seasons. And he says it with a straight face, and I'm like, is that really what you're concerned about? I mean, Harrison Mevis didn't even line up a field goal in the last game. So I mean, if you're really, I don't think Mizzou should be too concerned about SEMO. Although it's good, and he's just he's doing what he needs to do to motivate his team, and making sure everyone knows that no one's guaranteed playing time this week. Although I think it would do, not necessarily wonders, but it would help Mizzou if they're able to get some of those, second, third string guys out there to give them some game experience. So some of those guys could be ready, perhaps, especially at the linebacker position. Let's get somebody else out there that could hopefully stop the run. So that's what Mizzou needs to do. This will be, I think, a good confidence booster for the Tigers.
It is funny when you say that, though, because from a media and fan standpoint, when we see coaches say something like that, if it's Eli Drinkwitz talking about SEMO, Nick Saban is famous for this. It's Alabama versus some directional Louisiana school you've never heard of, and they're favored by 55 points. But I truly believe these coaches really don't overlook these teams, and they probably dive into every single part of these teams, even though they know they're going to win by 60. They're probably watching as much tape as they would if they're playing an SEC team. One more question for you, Andrew, because I know Desiree Reed-Francois was in town and got some rave reviews for talking to a big crowd here in St. Louis. I asked you about her a couple weeks ago, but what are you seeing early on in terms of her vision of trying to make Mizzou a power in the SEC? And you got the craziness going on with NIL, and to get some of these recruits, you're going to have to find some ways to compensate them. And I think that was a big part of Desiree Reed-Francois getting that gig. So what have you seen so far from her?
Yeah, I've got a chance to talk to a couple people about Desiree, including, I'm not going to name any names, so I don't want to throw it out there like that, but just an athlete that's not a football or basketball player, one of the other sports on campus. And she told me that it was one of the sports that doesn't get covered as much, and Desiree made her feel like she was on the football team or she was on the basketball team. She really spent time with her and her team more so than any athletic director had ever done. So much so that she said she helped them, set up a ping pong table in one of the athletic complexes. And for an athletic director to set up a ping pong table, when I heard that, I was just like, wow, she's definitely really trying to connect with these athletes. Clearly in St. Louis, it seemed like she really connected with the fans. And that's huge. And it also tells me that she's working really, really hard. She is making the most out of every second of her day to be able to, get around the state, also help out the athletes that might not feel as appreciated in years past. So I would say that, 10 out of 10 from Desiree so far. I'm looking forward to hopefully having her on my Sunday show coming up. So I'm looking forward to getting to know her even more. But, so far, yeah, I think she's really knocked it out of the park and impressed everyone she's talked to.
That is great to hear. Andrew, appreciate the time as always, sir. Enjoy the SEMO game, and we'll talk with you again next Thursday.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Charlie.
All right. Thank you. That is Andrew Kauffman, sports director at KMIZ TV in Columbia.